The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Prince Junior made his way to the stables. At 17, he had grown tired of the endless lessons in diplomacy and economics that filled his days. What he craved was adventure, something real beyond the gilded walls of his father's kingdom. Prince Junior was not like other royals his age. While his cousins spent their time at fancy parties and expensive shopping trips, he preferred to explore the kingdom's villages and talk to common people. His father, King Alexander, often worried about his son's unconventional interests, but the queen always defended Junior's curious nature. A good king must know his people, she would say, and Junior took those words to heart. On this particular morning, Junior had convinced his personal guard, Captain Marcus, to let him ride alone to the eastern border. It was supposed to be a simple journey to visit a small farming village that had been struggling with poor harvests. The king had approved the trip, seeing it as good practice for Junior's future role as ruler. Junior mounted his black stallion, Thunder, and set off through the palace gates. The horse was a gift for his 16th birthday, and the two had formed an unbreakable bond. Thunder seemed to understand Junior's restless spirit and shared his love for exploration. The ride to the eastern village took Junior through dense forests and rolling hills. He loved these moments of freedom, away from the constant attention of servants and advisors. The wind in his hair and the rhythm of Thunder's hooves on the dirt path made him feel truly alive. As he traveled deeper into the kingdom's countryside, Junior noticed how different life was outside the palace walls. Farmers worked hard in their fields. Children played with simple toys made from wood and cloth, and families gathered around modest dinner tables. This was the real kingdom, not the polished version he saw during official ceremonies. The village of Millbrook came into view just as the sun reached its highest point. Junior could see the effects of the poor harvest immediately. The usually green fields looked brown and withered, and many of the villagers appeared thin and worried. Children who should have been playing looked tired and hungry. Junior tied Thunder to a post outside the village inn and walked among the people. Unlike in the capital city, where everyone bowed and used formal language, here the villagers treated him with simple respect, but continued their daily work. He appreciated this honesty. "Your Highness," called out an elderly woman named Martha who ran the village bakery. "We weren't expecting you today." "I wanted to see how everyone was managing," Junior replied, accepting a cup of water from her weathered hands. "My father is concerned about the harvest problems." Martha's face showed both gratitude and worry. "It's been a difficult year, Your Highness. The rains came too late and then too much all at once. Many families are struggling to feed their children." Junior spent the afternoon walking through Millbrook, listening to stories from farmers, shopkeepers, and families. Each conversation taught him something new about the challenges his future subjects faced. He made mental notes about everything, planning to discuss solutions with his father upon his return. As evening approached, Junior knew he should start the journey back to the palace. The ride would take several hours, and he had promised Captain Marcus he would return before nightfall. Thunder seemed eager to run again after the long rest. The return journey began peacefully. Junior felt satisfied with his visit to Millbrook and excited to share what he had learned. The problems there were serious, but he believed they could be solved with the right resources and planning. Perhaps they could dig new wells for irrigation, or provide seeds that were better suited to the changing weather patterns. The forest path that had seemed so welcoming in the morning now felt different in the fading daylight. Shadows grew longer and darker between the trees. Thunder's ears twitched nervously, and the horse's steps became more careful and alert. Junior trusted Thunder's instincts completely. The stallion had an amazing ability to sense danger long before humans could detect it. If Thunder was nervous, there was probably a good reason. Junior slowed their pace and listened carefully to the sounds of the forest around them. At first, everything seemed normal. Birds chirped in the trees, leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, and small animals moved through the underbrush. But then Junior heard something else, something that made his blood run cold. Human voices, raised in anger and fear, echoed through the trees ahead. The sounds were coming from the direction of the main road that connected Millbrook to the palace. Junior's heart began to race as he realized that someone was in serious trouble. Thunder snorted and pawed the ground, clearly agitated by whatever was happening ahead. Junior leaned forward and patted the horse's neck, trying to calm both Thunder and himself. His mind raced with possibilities about what could be causing such distress. The voices grew louder as Junior approached, and he could make out individual words now. Someone was shouting orders while others cried out in what sounded like pain or terror. Junior's training told him to turn around and ride back to Millbrook for help. But his instincts told him that time was running out for whoever was in trouble. Junior made a decision that would change everything. Instead of turning back, he guided Thunder off the main path and into the dense trees beside the road. Moving as quietly as possible, he approached the source of the commotion. What he saw when he finally got close enough would test every lesson he had ever learned about courage, leadership, and doing what was right. Through the trees, Junior could see a group of armed bandits surrounding several figures on the road. His heart stopped when he recognized the distinctive armor and weapons of the Royal Guard. Members of his father's elite protection force were under attack, and from what Junior could see, they were badly outnumbered and in desperate need of help. Junior's hands trembled as he counted the bandits from his hiding spot among the trees. There were at least 12 of them, all armed with swords and crossbows, surrounding what appeared to be only 4 royal guards. The guards fought bravely, but they were clearly wounded and exhausted from a long battle. Thunder shifted restlessly beneath him, sensing his rider's tension. Junior placed a calming hand on the stallion's neck while trying to think clearly. Every instinct told him to charge forward and help the guards, but he knew that would likely result in his own capture or death. The bandits would have an even more valuable prize if they got their hands on the prince. From his concealed position, Junior could see that one of the guards was Captain Harrison, his father's most trusted military advisor. Harrison had taught Junior swordplay and battle tactics since he was 12 years old. The captain's left arm hung uselessly at his side, clearly injured, but he continued to fight with his right hand. The other 3 guards were younger men Junior recognized from the palace: Marcus the shield-bearer, Thomas the archer, and William the scout. All 3 showed signs of serious injuries, but they formed a protective circle around something or someone Junior could not see clearly. "Surrender now, and we might let you live," shouted the bandit leader, a tall man with a scarred face and cruel eyes. "Continue fighting and we'll make sure your deaths are slow and painful." Captain Harrison spat blood on the ground and raised his sword higher. "Royal guards do not surrender to common thieves," he declared, though his voice showed the strain of his injuries. Junior's mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. Royal guards rarely traveled in such small groups unless they were on a secret mission. What were they doing on this remote forest road? And what were they protecting so fiercely that they would fight to the death rather than surrender? The answer came when Junior heard a weak voice from the center of the guard's protective circle. "Please, just let them go. Take me, but spare their lives." Junior's blood froze. That voice belonged to Princess Elena, his younger sister. The 14-year-old princess was supposed to be safe in the palace, attending her evening music lessons. What was she doing here in the middle of a deadly battle on a dangerous forest road? Everything suddenly made sense. The guards were on a rescue mission. Elena must have been kidnapped, and these brave men had risked their lives to save her. But now they were all trapped, and the situation was getting worse by the minute. The bandit leader laughed cruelly at Elena's words. "Oh, we're definitely taking you, little princess. But these guards have caused us too much trouble. They've killed 3 of my best men. They need to pay for that." Junior watched in horror as the bandits began to close in on the exhausted guards. Captain Harrison could barely lift his sword, and the other 3 men were swaying on their feet from blood loss and exhaustion. In moments they would all be dead, and Elena would be at the mercy of these ruthless criminals. Time seemed to slow down as Junior faced the most important decision of his young life. He could ride back to Millbrook and get help, but that would take at least an hour, and the guards would certainly be dead by then. He could try to ride to the palace for reinforcements, but that would take even longer. The only option that might save his sister and the loyal guards was immediate action. Junior closed his eyes and remembered his father's words from their last conversation about leadership. "A true king does not ask others to take risks he would not take himself," King Alexander had said. "When your people are in danger, you must be willing to sacrifice everything to protect them." Opening his eyes with new determination, Junior began to formulate a desperate plan. It was dangerous and likely to fail, but it was the only chance the guards had. He would need to use every skill Captain Harrison had taught him. every lesson about tactics and strategy he had learned in the palace war room. First, Junior quietly dismounted Thunder and tied the stallion to a sturdy tree branch. The horse would be safer here than in the middle of a battle. Thunder seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and stood perfectly still, his intelligent eyes watching Junior's every movement. Next, Junior checked his weapons. He carried a sword, a gift from his father on his 16th birthday, and a small crossbow he used for hunting. He also had a horn that could produce a loud blast, traditionally used to signal hunting parties but potentially useful for creating confusion among the bandits. Junior's plan was simple, but risky. He would circle around behind the bandits using the dense forest for cover. When he was in position, he would create a distraction that might give the guards a chance to rally and fight back. It was not much of a plan, but it was better than watching good men die without trying to help. Moving as silently as possible, Junior began to make his way through the trees. Years of hunting expeditions had taught him how to move through the forest without making noise. Every step had to be carefully placed, every branch avoided. One snapped twig or rustling leaf could alert the bandits to his presence and ruin any chance of success. As he moved, Junior could hear the battle continuing behind him. The clash of swords, the groans of wounded men, and Elena's frightened voice all reached his ears. He forced himself not to look back, knowing that seeing his sister in danger would only make him act recklessly. The forest seemed to stretch forever as Junior carefully worked his way around the bandit group. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cool evening air. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound made him freeze in terror. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Junior reached a position behind the bandit line. From here he could see the entire scene clearly. The guards were barely standing. Elena knelt in their protective circle looking pale and frightened, and the bandits were preparing for their final attack. Junior raised his hunting horn to his lips and took a deep breath. This was it. In a few seconds he would either save his sister and the loyal guards or he would die trying. There was no middle ground, no safe option. He was about to discover what kind of man he truly was. Junior blew the hunting horn with all the strength in his lungs. The piercing sound echoed through the forest like the call of an angry giant, startling birds from the trees and causing every person on the road to freeze in surprise. The bandits spun around, searching for the source of the unexpected noise, their formation breaking apart in confusion. In that moment of chaos, Junior acted. He loaded his crossbow and aimed at the bandit leader, the scarred man who had been threatening his sister. The bolt flew true, striking the leader in the shoulder and spinning him around with a cry of pain and rage. "We're surrounded," Junior shouted from his hiding place, trying to make his voice sound deeper and older. "Royal reinforcements have arrived. Surrender now or face the full might of the king's army." The bluff worked better than Junior had dared to hope. Several of the younger bandits looked around nervously, clearly believing that a large force of soldiers was about to emerge from the forest. Their confidence began to crack as they imagined themselves outnumbered and trapped. Captain Harrison, despite his injuries, immediately understood what was happening. The veteran soldier had recognized Junior's voice, even disguised as it was. Instead of calling out the prince's name and ruining the deception, Harrison rallied his men with renewed energy. "You heard the horn," Harrison shouted to his fellow guards. "Help has arrived. Now we show these criminals what royal guards are made of." The captain's words had an immediate effect. Marcus raised his shield higher, Thomas notched an arrow to his bow despite a wounded arm, and William drew his sword with fierce determination. The guard's sudden burst of energy caught the bandits off guard, and the tide of battle began to shift. Junior continued to move through the trees, shooting crossbow bolts at targets of opportunity and shouting commands to imaginary soldiers. "Second company, circle around to the left. Archers, take position on the ridge." His voice carried through the forest, adding to the bandits' confusion and fear. The bandit leader, bleeding from his shoulder wound, tried to restore order among his men. "It's a trick," he screamed. "There's only one person out there. Kill the guards and grab the princess." But doubt had already taken hold among the criminal gang. 3 of the bandits broke ranks and ran into the forest, deciding that no amount of gold was worth dying for. Their desertion caused panic among the others, and soon half the bandit force was fleeing in different directions. This was the moment Junior had been waiting for. With the enemy force reduced and confused, He burst from the trees on foot, sword drawn and battle cry on his lips. The remaining bandits turned to face this new threat, giving the guards precious seconds to recover and regroup. Junior's sword training served him well as he engaged the nearest bandit. The man was larger and more experienced, but Junior was faster and fighting for his family. Their blades clashed in a shower of sparks, and Junior managed to land a cut across the bandit's sword arm, forcing him to drop his weapon. Meanwhile, Captain Harrison and his men pressed their advantage. Thomas's arrows found their marks, dropping 2 more bandits, while Marcus used his shield to knock another unconscious. William, despite his wounds, managed to disarm a 4th criminal and send him running into the forest. The bandit leader, realizing his plan was falling apart, made a desperate move. Ignoring the pain from his wounded shoulder, he lunged toward Princess Elena with his dagger drawn. If he could not escape with his prize, he would at least have revenge against the royal family. "Elena, move," Junior shouted, but his sister was frozen with fear, unable to react to the immediate danger rushing toward her. Time seemed to slow as Junior watched the bandit leader close the distance to his sister. The prince was too far away to reach her in time, and the guards were all engaged with other enemies. Everything depended on Elena finding the courage to save herself. At the last possible moment, Elena's survival instincts kicked in. Instead of trying to run, she threw herself sideways and rolled away from the bandits' attack. The leader's momentum carried him forward, and he stumbled over the princess's abandoned position. This gave Captain Harrison the opening he needed. Despite his injured arm, the veteran guard tackled the bandit leader from behind, bringing both men crashing to the ground. They wrestled for control of the dagger, but Harrison's experience and determination won out. Within moments, the bandit leader was unconscious, his weapon lying harmlessly in the dirt. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader defeated and their numbers decimated, lost all will to fight. Those who could still walk ran into the forest, abandoning their wounded comrades and their failed mission. The road fell silent except for the heavy breathing of the exhausted guards and the soft whimpering of Elena, who was finally allowing herself to feel the fear she had been holding back. Junior rushed to his sister's side, helping her to her feet and checking for injuries. Aside from some bruises and scratches, Elena appeared to be physically unharmed, though she was clearly traumatized by her ordeal. "Junior," Elena whispered, hardly believing her eyes. "What are you doing here? How did you find us?" "I was riding back from Millbrook when I heard the fighting," Junior explained, pulling his sister into a protective embrace. "I couldn't leave you and the guards to face this alone." Captain Harrison approached them, his face showing both relief and concern. "Your Highness, that was incredibly brave but also incredibly dangerous. If those bandits had captured you as well—" "But they didn't," Junior interrupted firmly. "And now Elena is safe, thanks to your courage and the dedication of your men. How badly are you all injured?" The captain looked around at his fellow guards. All of them were wounded, some seriously, but they were alive and the mission was complete. "We'll live, Your Highness, though we'll need medical attention soon." Junior nodded and began to take charge of the situation. Despite his youth, the events of the evening had awakened something inside him, a natural leadership ability that would serve him well as a future king. His first priority was getting everyone to safety and ensuring that the wounded received proper care. "Can any of you ride?" Junior asked the guards. When they confirmed they could manage despite their injuries, he continued with his plans. "Elena will ride with me on Thunder. Captain Harrison, you and your men follow close behind. We need to reach the palace as quickly as possible." As they prepared to leave the scene of the battle, Junior looked back at the unconscious bandit leader and the weapons scattered across the road. There would be questions to answer, investigations to conduct, and security measures to review. But for now, the most important thing was getting his sister home safely and ensuring that the brave guards received the recognition they deserved for their sacrifice and loyalty. The ride back to the palace was tense and difficult. Elena clung tightly to Junior as Thunder carried them both through the dark forest, while the wounded guards followed as best they could on their horses. Every shadow seemed to hide potential danger, and every sound made the group pause to listen for pursuing bandits. Captain Harrison, despite his serious injuries, insisted on maintaining his duties as protector. He rode at the rear of the group, constantly checking behind them for signs of trouble. The other guards formed a protective formation around the royal siblings, their training overcoming their pain and exhaustion. As they traveled, Elena finally found the courage to tell Junior what had happened to her. Earlier that day, she had received a message claiming to be from their aunt, the Duchess of Westmore, asking Elena to meet her secretly in the village of Millbrook. The message said it was urgent and concerned a surprise birthday gift for their father. "I know I shouldn't have gone alone," Elena whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "But the message seemed so real and I wanted to help with Father's surprise. I took the servants' passage out of the palace and hired a horse from the village stable." Junior listened to his sister's story with growing anger and concern. The bandits had clearly planned this kidnapping carefully, using Elena's love for their father against her. They had studied the royal family's habits and weaknesses, making their trap almost impossible to resist. "The Duchess never sent that message, did she?" Junior asked, though he already knew the answer. Elena shook her head sadly. "When I reached the meeting place, there was no aunt waiting for me. Instead, these horrible men grabbed me and tied me up. They said they were going to demand a huge ransom from Father, enough gold to make them rich for life." Captain Harrison, riding close enough to hear the conversation, added his own perspective to the events. "We discovered the princess was missing during the evening meal. When the servants found the false message in her room, His Majesty immediately ordered a search party. We tracked her to Millbrook and followed the bandits' trail into the forest." The captain's voice grew grim as he continued. "We caught up with them just as they were preparing to send their ransom demands to the palace. A fight broke out when we demanded Princess Elena's release. They were better prepared than we expected, and they had more men than our scouts reported." Junior could see the guilt and frustration in the veteran guard's face. Harrison blamed himself for walking into the bandits' trap, even though he had done everything possible to save Elena. The prince made a mental note to ensure that his father understood how bravely the guards had fought. As they approached the outer walls of the palace, Junior could see torches burning in every window. Word of Elena's disappearance had clearly spread throughout the royal household, and everyone was waiting anxiously for news. Guards patrolled the walls with unusual intensity, and Junior could make out additional soldiers positioned at every gate. The main gates swung open as soon as the sentries recognized the returning party. Palace guards rushed forward to help the wounded men from their horses while servants ran to fetch the royal physician. Within moments, the courtyard was filled with activity as the household staff sprang into action. King Alexander appeared in the courtyard, still wearing his formal dinner robes but with his hair disheveled and his face showing the strain of worry. When he saw both of his children safe, the relief on his face was overwhelming. The powerful king, who could command armies and govern kingdoms, looked like nothing more than a grateful father as he embraced Elena and Junior. "Thank God you're both safe," the king whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "When we found Elena missing and then lost contact with the search party, I feared the worst." Queen Isabella arrived moments later, having run from the palace despite her elegant gown and delicate shoes. She gathered both children into her arms, tears of relief streaming down her face. For several minutes, the royal family stood together in the courtyard, holding each other and allowing themselves to feel the joy of being reunited. Eventually, practical concerns took over. The wounded guards needed immediate medical attention, and there were urgent security matters to address. Junior insisted on staying while the palace physician examined Captain Harrison and his men, wanting to ensure they received the best possible care. "These men saved Elena's life," Junior told his father firmly. "If they hadn't found her when they did, and if they hadn't fought so bravely against overwhelming odds, we might have lost her forever." King Alexander nodded solemnly, already planning the honors and rewards he would bestow upon the loyal guards. But first he needed to understand exactly what had happened in the forest, and how his son had managed to turn a desperate situation into a successful rescue. As the palace physician worked on the guards' injuries, Junior recounted his role in the evening's events. He described his visit to Millbrook, his decision to investigate the sounds of fighting, and his desperate plan to help the outnumbered guards. He spoke honestly about his fear and uncertainty, but also about his determination to protect his sister and the loyal men who served their family. The king listened to every word with growing pride and concern. He was proud of Junior's courage and quick thinking, but concerned about the risks his son had taken. The prince could easily have been killed or captured, creating an even worse crisis for the kingdom. "You showed great bravery tonight," King Alexander said finally, "but you also took enormous risks. What if the bandits had been better organized? What if your plan had failed?" Junior met his father's gaze steadily. "Then I would have died trying to save Elena and the guards. Sometimes a leader has to choose between safety and doing what's right. You taught me that a king's first duty is to protect his people, even if it means putting himself in danger." The king was silent for a long moment, recognizing his own words and teachings reflected in his son's actions. Junior had learned the lessons of leadership well, perhaps too well for his father's peace of mind. But King Alexander also realized that his son had crossed an important threshold that evening, moving from childhood into the responsibilities of future kingship. Queen Isabella, who had been listening to the conversation while comforting Elena, added her own perspective. "Junior acted with honor and courage tonight. He saved his sister's life and the lives of 4 loyal guards. We should be proud of him, not scolding him for doing what any good king would do." As the immediate crisis passed and the wounded guards were declared stable by the physician, the royal family began to process the emotional impact of the evening's events. Elena would need time to recover from her traumatic experience. The security protocols would need to be reviewed and strengthened, and the kingdom would need to address the growing problem of banditry in the remote regions. But for now, Junior felt a deep sense of satisfaction and growth. He had faced a real crisis and responded with courage and intelligence. The theoretical lessons about leadership and responsibility had become practical experience, and he had discovered that he was capable of making the hard decisions that kingship would require. The days following the rescue were filled with intense activity throughout the palace. King Alexander ordered a complete investigation into how the bandits had managed to infiltrate the kingdom's security so effectively. Royal investigators questioned servants, examined the forged message that had lured Elena away, and tracked down the criminal network that had planned the kidnapping. Junior found himself at the center of many of these discussions. His first-hand account of the battle and his observations about the bandits' organization provided valuable intelligence for the royal guard. He described their weapons, their tactics, and most importantly, the fact that they had known specific details about Elena's habits and the palace's security procedures. "They knew too much about our family," Junior explained to his father during one of their strategy meetings. The message they sent to Elena mentioned personal details that only someone with inside knowledge could have known. "Either they have a spy in the palace or they've been watching us for a very long time." This possibility deeply troubled King Alexander. The idea that enemy agents might be operating within the palace walls was a nightmare scenario that could threaten the entire royal family. He ordered background investigations on all recent staff additions and implemented new security protocols that would make future kidnapping attempts much more difficult. Meanwhile, Elena struggled with the emotional aftermath of her ordeal. The confident, cheerful princess had become withdrawn and fearful, jumping at unexpected sounds and refusing to leave the palace grounds. She blamed herself for falling into the bandits' trap and putting the loyal guards in danger. Junior spent long hours with his sister, trying to help her work through her feelings of guilt and fear. He understood that her recovery would take time, and that pushing her to return to normal too quickly would only make things worse. Instead, he focused on rebuilding her confidence and sense of security. "You couldn't have known it was a trap," Junior reminded her during one of their conversations in the palace garden. "The message was expertly crafted to appeal to your love for father and your generous nature. Even experienced diplomats might have been fooled by such a deception." Elena appreciated her brother's support, but she continued to struggle with feelings of responsibility for the guards' injuries. Captain Harrison was recovering slowly from his wounds, and the other 3 guards were all dealing with varying degrees of physical trauma from the battle. To help Elena process her feelings, Junior arranged for her to visit the guards during their recovery. He believed that seeing their positive attitudes and lack of blame toward her would help heal her emotional wounds. The visits were awkward at first, but gradually became a source of strength for both Elena and the recovering guards. Captain Harrison, in particular, became an important source of wisdom for both royal siblings. Despite his injuries, the veteran soldier maintained his sense of humor and his dedication to the royal family. He helped Elena understand that accepting blame for the bandits' actions was neither logical nor helpful. "Your Highness," Harrison told Elena during one of her visits, "in my 20 years of service to your family, I've learned that evil people will always find ways to hurt good people. The key is not to let their actions change who you are or make you afraid to be generous and trusting." The captain's words resonated with Elena, who began to see her experience not as a personal failure, but as an encounter with forces beyond her control. She started to participate more actively in palace life, though she remained more cautious about venturing outside the secured areas. Junior also learned important lessons from the aftermath of the rescue. He discovered that heroic actions often have complicated consequences, and that solving one problem can create new challenges. The bandits who had escaped were still at large, potentially planning revenge against the royal family. The kingdom's remote regions remained vulnerable to criminal activity, and the security breaches that had enabled the kidnapping needed to be addressed systematically. King Alexander began involving Junior more directly in the kingdom's governance, recognizing that his son had demonstrated the judgment and courage necessary for leadership. Junior attended council meetings, participated in strategic planning sessions, and took on increased responsibilities for monitoring the kingdom's security situation. Leadership is not just about making brave decisions in crisis moments, the king explained to Junior during one of their private discussions. It's also about the patient, careful work of building systems and relationships that prevent crises from occurring in the first place. This lesson proved valuable when Junior proposed a comprehensive plan for addressing the banditry problem in the kingdom's remote regions. Instead of simply sending more soldiers to hunt down criminals, he suggested a multifaceted approach that would address the root causes of the problem. Junior's plan included increased economic investment in struggling rural communities, improved communication networks between remote villages and the capital, and a new system of local militias that could respond quickly to criminal threats. He had learned about these needs during his visit to Millbrook and other villages, and he understood that poverty and isolation made communities vulnerable to criminal exploitation. The king was impressed by the thoughtfulness and scope of Junior's proposal. It demonstrated that his son had learned to think beyond immediate problems to consider long-term solutions. More importantly, it showed that Junior's natural empathy for common people could be translated into effective policy recommendations. Implementation of the plan began immediately, with Junior taking personal responsibility for coordinating the various elements. He worked with Treasury officials to allocate funding for rural development projects, collaborated with military leaders to establish the local militia system, and traveled to remote communities to explain the new security measures. These travels gave Junior additional opportunities to connect with his future subjects and learn about their daily challenges. Unlike his previous visits, which had been largely observational, these trips involved real problem-solving and decision-making. He found himself mediating disputes between farmers, helping villages plan infrastructure improvements, and working with local leaders to identify potential security threats. The work was demanding and sometimes frustrating, but Junior discovered that he genuinely enjoyed the challenge of governance. Each problem required a different approach, and each solution taught him something new about leadership and human nature. He began to understand why his father often worked late into the night, wrestling with the complex issues that affected thousands of people. As months passed, the kingdom's security situation gradually improved. The local militia system proved effective at deterring criminal activity, and the economic investments began to strengthen rural communities. Most importantly, the increased communication networks made it much harder for criminal organizations to operate without detection. Junior's role in these improvements did not go unnoticed by the kingdom's citizens. Stories of the prince who had rescued his sister and then worked to protect all of the kingdom's people spread throughout the land. Junior found himself becoming a symbol of hope and effective leadership, a reputation that would serve him well when he eventually inherited the throne. The experience had transformed him from a restless teenager into a confident young leader who understood both the privileges and responsibilities of his position. He had learned that true courage was not just about individual acts of bravery, but about the sustained commitment to serving others and making difficult decisions for the greater good. 6 months after the rescue, Junior stood in the palace courtyard watching a ceremony that filled him with deep pride and satisfaction. King Alexander was personally honoring Captain Harrison and the 3 guards who had risked their lives to save Elena. The men stood at attention, their ceremonial armor gleaming in the morning sunlight, as the king bestowed upon them the highest military decoration in the kingdom. For extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds, King Alexander proclaimed, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, and for unwavering loyalty to the crown and protection of Princess Elena, I hereby award you the Order of the Golden Shield, the highest honor our kingdom can bestow upon its defenders. The ceremony was attended by nobles, military officers, and palace staff, all of whom had heard the story of the dramatic rescue. As each guard stepped forward to receive his medal, the crowd erupted in applause. Junior felt a surge of emotion as he watched these brave men receive the recognition they so richly deserved. Captain Harrison, now fully recovered from his injuries, caught Junior's eye and gave him a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The veteran soldier understood that the prince's quick thinking and courage had been just as crucial to the rescue's success as the guards' fighting skills. Their partnership that night had forged a bond of mutual respect that would last for years to come. Elena stood beside Junior, looking radiant and confident once again. The months of recovery had restored her natural cheerfulness, though she retained a new maturity and awareness of the world's dangers. She had become an advocate for improved security measures throughout the kingdom, using her experience to help other potential victims avoid similar traps. I'm proud of all of you, Elena whispered to Junior as they watched the ceremony. But I'm especially proud of my big brother who saved us all. After the ceremony, Junior found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed since that fateful evening in the forest. The restless teenager who had been chafing at his royal duties had been replaced by a focused young leader who understood the weight and importance of his responsibilities. His relationship with his father had also evolved significantly. King Alexander now treated Junior more as a partner than a student, seeking his advice on important matters and including him in high-level discussions about the kingdom's future. The king had come to rely on Junior's insights about rural communities and his ability to connect with common people. You've grown into the kind of leader this kingdom needs, King Alexander told Junior during one of their evening walks through the palace gardens. Not just someone who can make tough decisions, but someone who understands the human cost of those decisions and works to minimize suffering. Junior appreciated his father's words, but he remained focused on the work that still needed to be done. The bandit problem had been largely solved, but new challenges were emerging. Trade disputes with neighboring kingdoms, drought conditions affecting some agricultural regions, and growing political tensions within the nobility all required attention and leadership. And of Junior's most significant achievements during this period was establishing a new network of village councils throughout the kingdom. These democratically elected bodies gave common people a voice in local governance and created a communication channel between remote communities and the royal administration. The idea had grown out of Junior's observation that many problems in rural areas stemmed from the people's sense of powerlessness and disconnection from the capital. By giving villages the authority to make decisions about local issues and the ability to communicate directly with the palace, Junior hoped to prevent the isolation and desperation that made communities vulnerable to criminal exploitation. Implementation of the village council system required extensive travel and negotiation. Junior spent weeks in remote regions meeting with local leaders and explaining the benefits of the new system. He encountered resistance from some traditional nobles who saw the councils as a threat to their authority. But he gradually built support by demonstrating the practical advantages of increased local participation in governance. The first village council elections were held on a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after Elena's kidnapping. Junior traveled to 3 different communities to observe the voting process and celebrate this milestone in democratic participation. He was moved by the enthusiasm and seriousness with which the villagers approached their new civic responsibilities. In the village of Millbrook, where Junior's journey had begun, an elderly farmer named Thomas was elected as the first council chairman. Thomas had been one of the people Junior had spoken with during his initial visit, and the prince was pleased to see him take on this leadership role. "Your Highness," Thomas said during the celebration following the election, This council system will help us solve problems before they become crises. We can address issues like crop diseases, drainage problems, and security concerns while they're still manageable. Junior nodded, understanding that Thomas was describing exactly the kind of preventive governance that his father had taught him to value. By dealing with small problems early, the village councils could prevent the accumulation of grievances and desperation that criminal organizations often exploited. The success of the village council system caught the attention of neighboring kingdoms, and Junior found himself hosting delegations of foreign officials who wanted to learn about his innovations. These interactions gave him valuable experience in diplomacy and helped him understand how the kingdom's internal policies could influence its international relationships. During one such meeting, the ambassador from the northern kingdom of Valdris complimented Junior on his practical approach to governance. Most young princes focus on military glory or court intrigue, the ambassador observed. Your Highness has chosen to focus on the harder but more important work of improving people's daily lives. Junior appreciated the recognition, but he remained committed to learning and growing as a leader. He began studying the histories of other kingdoms, trying to understand how different approaches to governance had succeeded or failed over time. He also started corresponding with scholars and advisors from various lands, building a network of knowledge and expertise that would serve him well as a future king. Elena, meanwhile, had found her own path to contributing to the kingdom's welfare. She had become deeply involved in educational initiatives, particularly programs designed to help young people develop the critical thinking skills needed to avoid deception and manipulation. Her personal experience with the bandits' psychological tactics gave her unique insights into how criminals exploited people's emotions and desires. Education is the best defense against the kind of trap I fell into, Elena explained to Junior during one of their strategy sessions. If people understand how deception works, they're much less likely to become victims. Elena's educational programs proved highly popular and effective. She developed materials that taught people to recognize common fraud techniques, to verify the authenticity of messages and documents, and to trust their instincts when something seemed too good to be true. The programs were implemented throughout the kingdom's schools and community centers, creating a more informed and resilient population. As Junior watched his sister's work and reflected on his own achievements, he realized that their shared traumatic experience had ultimately strengthened both of them and made them better leaders. They had learned that effective governance required not just good intentions, but also practical skills, emotional intelligence, and the ability to work with others toward common goals. The anniversary of the rescue approaching, Junior felt grateful for the challenges he had faced and the lessons he had learned. The frightened teenager who had hidden in the forest a year ago had been replaced by a confident young leader who was ready to take on even greater responsibilities in service to his kingdom and its people. 2 years had passed since that transformative night in the forest, and Prince Junior stood before the great council of the kingdom, delivering his first major policy address as heir to the throne. The ornate chamber was filled with nobles, merchants, scholars, and representatives from the village councils he had established. King Alexander sat on his throne, watching with evident pride as his son presented a comprehensive vision for the kingdom's future. Honorable members of the council, Junior began, his voice strong and confident. We have learned that true security comes not from walls and weapons alone, but from ensuring that every citizen has a stake in our kingdom's prosperity and a voice in its governance. The address outlined Junior's plans for expanding the village council system, improving trade relationships with neighboring kingdoms, and establishing new educational institutions throughout the realm. Each proposal was backed by detailed research and practical examples from the successful programs already implemented. As Junior spoke, he caught sight of Captain Harrison in the audience, now promoted to general and serving as the kingdom's chief military advisor. The former guard gave him an encouraging nod, a reminder of how far they had all come since that desperate battle on a dark forest road. Elena sat in the royal section, beaming with pride at her brother's accomplishments. She had recently been appointed as the kingdom's first minister of education, a position created specifically to recognize her innovative work in developing critical thinking curricula. The siblings had become true partners in governance, each contributing unique strengths to their shared mission of improving life for all citizens. 2 years ago, Junior continued, Our kingdom faced a crisis that tested our resolve and revealed both our vulnerabilities and our strengths. We learned that criminals could exploit our trust and compassion, but we also discovered that courage, wisdom, and cooperation could overcome even the darkest challenges. The prince's words resonated throughout the chamber, reminding everyone present of the dramatic rescue that had captured the kingdom's imagination. But Junior was careful to frame that experience not as a personal triumph, but as a lesson in the importance of collective action and mutual support. The village of Millbrook, where I first learned about the struggles facing our rural communities, now serves as a model for prosperity and security. Their village council has implemented innovative farming techniques that have increased crop yields by 30%. Their local militia has not only prevented criminal activity, but has also assisted neighboring communities in times of need. Junior's specific examples and concrete results impressed even his most skeptical listeners. The young prince had developed a reputation for thorough preparation and attention to detail that complemented his natural charisma and communication skills. As he concluded his address, Junior outlined his vision for the kingdom's next phase of development. He proposed establishing a royal academy that would train future administrators and leaders from all social classes, creating opportunities for talented individuals regardless of their birth circumstances. He also suggested forming a permanent diplomatic corps that would strengthen relationships with neighboring kingdoms and prevent the conflicts that often led to economic hardship and social unrest. Leadership, Junior declared in his closing remarks, is not about commanding others or accumulating power for its own sake. True leadership is about serving others, protecting the vulnerable, and creating opportunities for everyone to contribute their talents to our shared prosperity. The response to Junior's address was overwhelmingly positive. Even nobles who had initially been skeptical of his democratic reforms expressed support for his practical approach to governance. The village council representatives were particularly enthusiastic, seeing in the prince a leader who truly understood and valued their contributions. After the formal session ended, Junior found himself surrounded by well-wishers and advisors, eager to discuss the implementation of his proposals. The conversations continued late into the evening, with detailed planning sessions that would translate the prince's vision into specific policies and programs. King Alexander approached his son as the crowd began to disperse, placing a proud hand on Junior's shoulder. 20 years ago, when you were born, I wondered what kind of king you would become, the king said quietly. Tonight I have my answer. You will be a better leader than I ever was because you understand something that took me years to learn. A king's greatest strength comes from the trust and support of his people. Junior felt a deep sense of gratitude for his father's guidance and support throughout his journey. From restless teenager to confident leader, everything I've accomplished has been built on the foundation you provided, he replied. The courage you taught me, the values you instilled, and the example you set made it possible for me to act when action was needed. As the palace settled into the quiet of late evening, Junior walked through the corridors where his transformation had begun. He paused at the window overlooking the courtyard, where he had once felt trapped by the constraints of royal life. Now those same constraints felt like opportunities to serve and protect the people who depended on his leadership. The events of that night in the forest had taught him that leadership was not about seeking adventure or glory, but about accepting responsibility and making difficult decisions when others were counting on him. The frightened guards, his kidnapped sister, and the desperate situation had all demanded immediate action, but the real test of leadership had come in the months and years that followed. Building village councils, implementing security reforms, and developing educational programs required patience, persistence, and the ability to work with many different people toward common goals. These skills were less dramatic than sword fighting or rescue operations, but they were ultimately more important for effective governance. Elena joined Junior at the window, both siblings looking out at the kingdom they would someday lead together. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been riding back from Millbrook that night? She asked. Junior considered the question seriously. I think someone else would have found a way to help, he said finally. Captain Harrison and his men were too brave and too skilled to give up easily. But I'm grateful that I was there, because it taught me that being a prince means more than attending ceremonies and learning protocol. It means being ready to act when your people need you, No matter how dangerous or difficult the situation might be, the kingdom had indeed been transformed by the events that began with a simple visit to a struggling village and culminated in a desperate rescue on a forest road. The crisis had revealed the strength and resilience of both the royal family and the common people, while also exposing vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed through systematic reform. Junior's leadership during and after the crisis had demonstrated that effective governance required both immediate courage and long-term vision. The ability to make split-second decisions in life or death situations was valuable, but so was the patience to build consensus, implement complex policies, and work steadily toward gradual improvement in people's lives. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky above the palace, Junior felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. The restless energy that had once made him feel confined by royal duties had been channeled into productive work that was making a real difference in people's lives. He had found his calling not in seeking adventure beyond the palace walls, but in using his position and privileges to serve others and protect the vulnerable. The young prince who had once dreamed of escaping his responsibilities had become a leader who embraced those responsibilities as opportunities to create positive change. The kingdom was safer, more prosperous, and more democratic because of his efforts, but more importantly, he had discovered that true fulfillment came not from personal achievement but from contributing to something larger than himself. Junior's journey from restless teenager to confident leader was complete, but his work as a future king was just beginning. The lessons learned during that transformative night in the forest would guide him throughout his reign, reminding him always that leadership meant serving others, protecting the vulnerable, and having the courage to act when action was needed most.